breakout session. My name is Jeanette Benson, and I guess we could say that I'm long in the tooth or older than dirt almost. I've been doing this for over 29 years, and this position and this program started here in the Central Valley, particularly in Merced, where I'm located at Merced Community College, and it grew out of a need. It was a need by farmers to find alternative markets. So there wasn't in agriculture any type of a trade association. It was just Department of Commerce that was up in San Francisco. The Foreign Ag Service, a division of the United States Department of Agriculture, was only in Washington, D.C. So we started, I guess the best way to give you a vision of what we did was working with growers to ship their products from beginning to end. And think back to almonds. I don't think there's any one of us that doesn't understand how big growing almonds are in the Central Valley. It's a Mediterranean climate, and few other places can do this. It does give a grower the best return on their investment of their land. And to that point, all they had before was Blue Diamond. So there are now so many. If you went to the Almond Board's website, you can see the number of processors and handlers, and those are all jobs tied to that. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is when we think of global trade, I don't think you turn on the news or television or following Twitter from our president, and you don't somehow get a feel for hearing about trade agreements. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. I often am not that loud, I'm told. Trade agreements, tariffs, and what's happening. If you've ever looked at the labeling on your clothing, you're going to notice that most of it's imported, made in China. If you go to the grocery stores, even the products that you're consuming there. So this snapshot gives a picture and where it lights up. It's too bad that we have a skewed projector, but down here you can just kind of see how far we are apart, but you can see the interactivity that's coming out. And when you look at our continent over there, and particularly the United States, you can just see that it's lit up, and you can see where we're doing continuous amounts of trades. The source of this was The Scientist in April 2009. So part of my presentation was to talk about how is technology, and this conference is on, the impact of technology and jobs. If you look at the internet, social media, all the ways that we communicate, that's what's impacting trade. Digital marketing is a huge thing that probably, I don't know if you're seeing it on your campuses, but I see a lot of it crossing every sector. And the parts that would change in that would be the cultures and the countries that you're trying to develop or working with. And that's pretty much one of the topics that the New Sector Navigator, our titles are a little bit confusing. That just basically means a statewide person or presence over the sector, and we're global trade. So she's got some digital badging, and as in high schools, that's important for you because there's ways that your students can begin to work towards these. And even if they want to go into just CTE, and they want to, let's just say they want to drive the tractor, or they're a farmer or grower, the thing of it is that product is usually exported, or if they're making wine, a lot of imports coming in. So they can actually work towards a credential that will allow them to have what I call one step up or a leg up on the next person competing for a job, because they'll have the skills that show that they understand global trade. And it's quite broad, but it's not really deep. So what I want to dig into is I'll show you a little bit of that the CGBP. So this just talks about why to credential. And why you credential is proved competency, professional development goal for a lot of employers, and it raises the level of the practice to the minimum bar, and it differentiates. I think that's really key. And the best thing about the CGBP, there's 4 domains of knowledge, and they are going to, they're going to, and this is talking about who takes the exam, but the 4 domains of knowledge are going to be in marketing, supply chain, global business. So when people are taking a business degree, they can get a job in a bank. This is finance, the documentation. And that's another part where the technology is something that's quite important. Let me just pop that down over here. I apologize that this is all so scattered in what we're doing here with our, we're really thrifty, so we bring these laptops and oftentimes don't have things. But this is, bless you, this is talking about the impact of technology. And this here, you can see up at the top, that's just globaltrademag.com. And they have running articles, but when you read something like this, and this is fairly fresh, they start talking about automation. And what you're going to see is automation of the, you've heard of blockchain, it's another way of compartmentalizing, and you can see open wise across a transaction, who's got what part of it. Because if you can imagine, as goods leave your plant, there's so many things that can happen to them. You know, the wonderful infrastructure that we have in 99, ha ha ha. Anyway, how many times have you seen a truck overturned? But if you can kind of watch where your transaction is, and that's part of what technology is doing, that you know, you know, with where your truck is or where your shipment is. Also, it will figure the cost for you. And this is what this is talking about. This whole article is talking about the automation of those platforms and the software. So between the bank, between the grower, packer, shipper, and then of course the buyer. Because if you can imagine a 25% tariff being slapped on your product, it's pretty frightening. And then there's the cost of the insurance. And I don't know if you remember hearing like pirating of vessels. So oftentimes, you know, things happen to the vessel, or there's acts of war where suddenly we're doing business with a country and then all of a sudden we're not. And that means when your goods are over there, it doesn't matter how you're getting paid. If someone freezes the assets of that bank, you're not going to get paid. So there's different types of insurance that a person can get, and this is getting all automated. So there's not the mistake. There's like, as the tariffs change, that's going to populate automatically. But you still have to understand that process. So this is pretty much on technology. You can think about people are also doing social media. When a lot of students come here, how many, by a show of hands, actually have a lot of international students on their campuses that are coming from abroad? No? You do? With those,
Yeah.
so that's an export. We're exporting our education. You know, I remember even way back when I was in high school, we had someone from Germany and a couple of people from other European countries. But we're exporting our education, and what they do when they go back home, they have lived here, and their products that they've grown accustomed to and like, that begins to do a pull of what we have, of our goods into that country. Let's see here. So that's a little bit on technology. Are there any questions on that? Hey, Nora. There's a seat up here. So now I'm going to move into the other part that was on the right at it. And this is a tool that I've worked for getting data for a long time. How do you know who actually exports and imports? It's done by and tracked by our government. And if you look at trade, or if you look at the whole world, everything's always about the money. So every government is tracking the money. Thus, we're looking at these tariffs and what we can kind of call trade disputes right now, renegotiating, because it means jobs. It also means the cost of your goods. So as you know, you begin to think about Christmas time, if suddenly we're not having the best of relationships with China, maybe all those goodies aren't going to be here unless they're already here. So you start to look at the pricing of that good as those tariffs come up. One raises it, the other raises it. The people are probably going to be suffering in their pocketbooks. And that's the importance of what's happening with trade. So in this tool, it's based on ocean, but it's the actual documents that go to the government on both sides of government. In the US, think of Walmart, think of Amazon, think of Target. They're pulling goods in from other countries. They actually pay to keep their data from being exposed because it's that competitive. So about 20% of what's shipped will not be shown in the data. There's a way to scrape that out. So this is something I've been working on for a long time, and I wish you could see it better in the screen. So it goes to 2015. If I can go move it a little bit here. You're going to see across the top here these colors, and what these colors, it starts out at the far to the left of here, every month, January, February, all the way to December. And you can see in the colors, it's a year. And what you can begin to watch is we have this by county because we put it down to zip code and we put it down to county. And we've done the whole state of California, but specifically what we're able to get into is what's happening with us here. And let me see if I can get into where we are. I want to get all of this. So this is us, and it's broken down by our regions. So we not only did the counties and the zip codes with the cities that are in a county, we then broke it back up into the regions that are the California community colleges. So I'm going to click right now on ours, which is the Central Mother Lode region. And those might not mash up with the high school. I don't know if there's a connect, but this is how we're broke up in the California community colleges regions here. So let's see if we went out to it. I'm sorry. So what this does then is you can turn into looking at the county, and there's Kern, and you can see, I hope, somewhat some of the dollar figures there. You could track to see by those counties what the value of trade is. And going back, yes, sorry. No, please ask.
Can you tell us how to find this? Because we're trying, at least me personally, I'm trying to write down where this site is. Do we have access to this?
What I plan to do is to make sure that every regional chair of the community colleges, so you can write on the back of the card, I'm interested, and just write or come see me what county, where you are in the Central Valley, and what I can pull is an Excel spreadsheet. Because I'd like the counselors to have it, I want the deans to have it, and I want it. I think it would be great for faculty, but I hadn't thought of counselors, but it'd be for you too, because what I did when I took this into about, probably it was a long time ago, 10 years, I took it into a high school classroom. I actually asked my youngest son, what will happen if I show a video today? He goes, oh, it's an excellent time to sleep. Thank you for your honesty. But nobody slept. I mean, because I was trying to empower the students to think about, let your uniqueness be the power that sets you apart. If you can speak another language, if you've lived in another country, it's an asset. But then I asked them, if you rode the bus, if you walked, however you got to school today, what companies did you pass, or what did you see being grown? And then I asked them, where do you think it's processed, or how do you think it's sold? So to that point, this would give you all of the companies in your backyard, and you get a view, as you're shaking your head, you already know, do they export, do they import, and then what jobs are there. So in answer to your question, how do you get it? I won't tell you how much money it costs and how much work is behind it. It's very tedious to get into it too. I think you try to see me moving it. So what we're trying to do is to break it down into quarterly regional reports that will be up on a website that you can go to. I'm hoping that even when I leave, I'll still be working on this because it runs till June 30th. But in answer to your question, it would be like a $7,500 subscription just for a single user. So that's the part we haven't got to. It is so many databases by a company, it keeps getting bought out. Something called Discardus owns it now. It's an international company. So if you can think about the governments all around the world, the data is being pulled in and then it's fed into this. And we're feeding quite quickly as soon as we have it here in the US. I'll show you, it shows you the ports they're going in and out of. So the next step was to try to take that list in the county or in your backyard. and to survey that company. For a counselor, for faculty, it'd be a great way to add these people to your advisory boards. So most of us are used to thinking about going to the HR department, what are the jobs? But if you, as a counselor, if you talk to your principal, you know, you're going to get a different view of what's happening in a classroom than if you actually talk to the teacher that's in that classroom, or maybe to a student. And the same thing if it is with a job, with what are the skills, the more you drill down. So actually talking to a person where the shipping is going out of. So that's what the next step is, to get to that company to ask what are the job titles. Somebody will call it customer service. Somebody else will call it logistics technician. There's so many titles. And Nora's standing in the back of the room. Nora Saronello there. She is our expert center of excellence who puts together lots of data from a lot of different sources, and she can talk about jobs. But I think she would agree with me, this one's hard to really ferret out from the data that's there. So in answer to your question, I want to help you. I can specifically tell me what county, what school, and I can pull those out for you. But I thank you for the question, because that's where I was going with it. For someone like, think the governor's office, which has GoBiz, or to look at the California Department of Food and Ag, this is a list of people that we can get to for marketing trade shows or international visitors. So groups of folks come here. And the best thing I can think of that we have as a region, we have the World Ag Expo that the second week of every February, that big, huge ag equipment show is happening. And when that's happening, there are so many delegations. I've worked at that show for years, and the one thing is to try to get that data. It's interesting, and it's everywhere. The U.S. is such a strong domestic market. We don't really look outside of our borders or think about, know as much about other countries as they know about us. I remember when I first started, there was a woman at the show from New Zealand, and we didn't have CNN and any of those channels yet on TV. I said, well, what do you miss the most about your homeland? She goes, your television. She said, I watched last night where somebody was showing this big turnip that was grown in the backyard, and she said there was nothing about like what's happening back home. So think about that. That's your technology, that you can be here and you can know about the weather back home just by your phone. That's how much technology has changed. When you go up to freetrade.com, you can start to see they're looking at our water supply in other countries. Are we really in a drought? Because that's a cost of a crop or something. So that's your technology. But back to this kind of thing. So you can drill down and start to look at trade. You can look at a commodity. You can see who's shipping what when. And that's what's kind of frightening to competitors, because you're seeing what you can almost figure out what they're selling for. And I'll show you just a little bit more of it, but I'm looking at time and I want to get to the videos. So if any of you are interested in some of this data, write that on your card too, and I can get you a list of that, or actually even meet with you more on how to use this. But I'll show you that you can click in the regions. So these are basically, we went to the central mother lode, and you can see there that we've got almost every city there. And we can zero down into just, I don't want to lose this again. Let's see here. There you go. What the U.S. company is, though. Come on, Jeanette. So here are the ports, and this is what's kind of interesting. You begin to see, like, and I have Mexico, I should tell you too. We are so far in working with this project, the only ones that have taken and looked at Mexico. Because Mexico has been huge for us, and despite what you hear in the media, this is what brings it really home. So it's not coming on a boat, as you well know, it's truck and rail. And oftentimes, product is sent to Texas because it's like just in time. So it sits somewhere in Texas, and you know that maybe the almond didn't come from Texas, but it's sitting there in warehouses. Because there is a lot of pilferage and other things that can happen when things are transiting borders and we have issues. You know, we have a drug issue and a lot of changes at the border. So those relationships are huge, and they don't just easily go away because of some politics. People still want to eat, they still want goods, they're still building things. So that's a whole other facet of this that I don't have time to really pop into, but I can pop over and show you what do we do with Mexico? What do we sell to them? What do we buy from them? And what you're going to find most of the time is the Mexican companies are here. Think of Bimbo. Aren't they hosted, or like the, what was it they had? The, was it the Twinkie or something that they have? You're laughing, you know. And so now they make all the Twinkies. That Bimbo bought that out. That company didn't go away. So then you can look at other products, and the good thing about it is you can actually see who those companies are and who's trading with Mexico. And I drill into liking to look at some of these things where the ports, because then you see where it's going out of. And if you were to look at Mexico, oftentimes on an import, you're going to find it's coming in where they have a trade agreement. Because Mexico has a trade agreement with Europe that we don't have. So when you start to analyze data or you're counseling a client, these are the things that you can look and globally are looking at. There's companies that go by what's called a NAICS code and then by a harmonized system code, and that's a lot to get into right now. But it's like for a product, this bottle of water, yes, it's water, but it's in what? A container. So there's a specific code just for this, so that universally around the world, we all know what we're talking about. It has its own specific code. And that classification is what? All about the money. And so there are people at Customs, not only in the US, but the other countries that are monitoring that. But in looking at the ports, you'll begin to see that these things go out different ports. And that also has to be where are ships calling, what are the freight. Oftentimes we had closed air bases here in the Central Valley where I live. Atwater had one. And people want to reuse it because it's a wonderful airstrip. The thing of it is, something has to be brought in and something has to go back out. And that's usually the problem. And then it's always about the money. Ag is a lower value shipment than, let's just say, it's not going to go out via air. It's going to go out via an ocean. But looking at where things come from, you can just see right here what are some of the products: edible fruit, nuts, nuclear. And you can begin to see things like in Fowler, California, there's a packaging plant there. So they're bringing in all of their packaging things from other countries. And I think for students, that would be very interesting to see how much global trade impacts their very life. What's really nice for some of us then, that are really geeks on all of this stuff, is to be able to drill down and say who these people are. So this is where I would be getting the list. Here are their names. So this would be a name of the whole central region. And that might be something that you want, because you're going to realize that just like students will move and go to different schools or different colleges, they don't stick like in their backyard. You're going to find that companies have branches in different locations. Joel Fruit is in my backyard, and typically their shipments don't show up. They do a lot of IQF, individually quick frozen. The fruit is thrown up in the air and frozen so that it doesn't stick together. But you'll see them go out of their corporate. Or think beef. You'll see the beef come out of like California ports, but most of it's coming from the Midwest. And that's just some of the things you can see, but you can begin to get that list of who's working in your backyard, and I'll get that for you. And the next thing I want to move into is those videos I promised you. And I want you to get to listen to at least one of them. So, would you rather do export or import? Who wants to do export?
Export.
Export?
Yeah.
Okay. I picked those out. These are the exports. And so when you can look at them, these are short little videos, and yes, there's a lot of them, but they are short. And the one I'm going to choose to let you listen to is Advancing Your Career with Professional Certifications. The CGBP, the Certified Global Business Professional, only takes 2 years of experience or a 2-year degree. So it's perfect for the person that's doing a CTE course that would like to, let's just say they work with their father on a ranch. And if they understood the international trade, they'd be into all the documentation, how to ship their product, how to package their product. And not only that, a chemical company, there's certain times like when Europe or China does not want a certain type of pesticide, or there's a huge lawsuit right now with corn because of what was happening with the seed that wasn't covered. So I'm going to play this one for you, and this is the series that's going to go up on YouTube that you can have. If you get this and later on you want to know how to put them together, you can contact us for that as well.
As you gain more responsibilities and experience on the job, you may be required or decide voluntarily to get a professional license or certification to move up the career ladder. Outside of going back to school for an advanced degree, there may be other options for you to expand your knowledge. In this module, we'll tell you about some of the programs and certifications in the international trade field that you may want to consider. Your job or industry may dictate a specific certification that you need, like the CPA for accountants. However, international trade offers a variety of different career paths with multiple certifications, from organizations that have stellar reputations to those that are fly-by-night. So you need to do some homework and be choosy about which one you decide to pursue. Here are some questions you can use to help narrow your choice. 1. Who recognizes the certification? Some certifications may be recognized within a state only versus nationwide, while others can be recognized globally. You should also look at job descriptions for positions in your desired field and see what certifications are listed within the job descriptions to give you a hint about what might be the most advantageous certification to pursue. 2. What are the requirements to maintain the certification? Before you invest time and money studying for a professional exam, you should find out what will be required of you on a long-term basis to keep your certification current. Will you have to accumulate a minimum number of hours training each year? Is there an annual recertification fee? 3. What benefits come with the certification? Don't be afraid to ask that selfish question, what's in it for me? You get the certification and then what? Does that get you access to certain jobs? Do you get to join a professional network for mentoring? Do you get unique experiences like backstage passes to your favorite concert? Just kidding. But you get the point. 4. What professional learning opportunities are available? If you take the exam, get the certification, and you're done, beware. No matter your field, there are always updates, changes, new technology, new legislation, different products, tools, you name it, that reshape the way you do your work. See if you can get credit for attending a conference, taking an online class, writing a white paper, or mentoring a student. Stability is overrated. You gotta keep moving or else you'll be left behind. 5. Who can tell me more? In a digital world where every interaction is reviewed, rated, and liked for relevance, don't discount the power of having a face-to-face conversation with an actual human being. Personal connections often trump everything else in international transactions, so don't be afraid to ask for an in-person meeting to find out more on the ins and outs of the profession. Who knows, you may even find your next gig. Now, we promised you a list of certifications, and while we won't endorse any specific certification in this course, here's a partial listing of some that we've seen. First, the CGBP, Certified Global Business Professional. The CGBP is offered by NASBITE International, a nonprofit association of educators, governments, and trade professionals. It targets those who work in government, students, professionals with experience in one field who may want to have a broader perspective, and test proficiency in global marketing, global management, trade finance, and supply chain management. The exam costs are approximately $400. Next is the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, SC Pro. The SC Pro has 3 levels and targets those working in the supply chain arena. It covers demand planning, procurement, supply chain, transportation, inventory management, warehousing, and order fulfillment. The exam costs are between $650 to $950. There's also the CES, Certified Export Specialist, from the National Customs Brokers and Freight Forwarders Association of America. The CES targets those working in the export compliance field. It covers export regulations, ITAR regulations, anti-boycott regulations, and Federal Maritime Commission regulations, among others. The exam costs range from $650 to $1,250. If finance is your field, then there's the CICP, Certified International Credit Professional, offered by FCB Global, Finance Credit International Business Association. The CICP targets financial professionals and covers credit management, accounts receivable, credit insurance, cash and inventory management. The exam costs range between $850 to $1,800. Every importer's best friend is the LCB, Licensed Customs Broker, from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. It's required for those empowered to conduct customs business on behalf of exporters and importers, and only U.S. citizens aged 21 and up with good moral character can apply. The exam covers the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, Code of Federal Regulations 19, Special Customs Programs, and Entry Procedures. The application fee is $200. Finally, if you don't want to become a customs broker but still need to tighten up your customs skills, then there's the CCS, Certified Customs Specialist, from the National Customs Brokers and Freight Forwarders Association of America. The CCS targets those working in import positions. It covers the harmonized tariff system, free trade agreements, duties, drawback, countervailing, and anti-dumping duties. The exam costs range from $650 to $1,250. As we come to the end of this module, we want to leave you with these final thoughts. First, obtaining a certification can improve your skills and enhance your career. Second, research to make sure that you're getting the right certification for your professional goals. And third, don't be stale. Even if you decide not to pursue a certification, keeping up with the latest developments in your field should be a lifetime goal. And you're taking this course, so you're well on your way.
We have time to see another one, so. This here will get into trade, and this would help you kind of understand export and import. And export and import are like the mirror image of one another. So what's happening on one side is happening on the other side. It's just who's getting what and who's the buyer, who's the seller. But this will give you a little bit about way back to the beginning of even the U.S. and how it's about the money.
Before we get started with the ins and outs of international trade, let's take a brief look through history to see how the U.S. developed its trade infrastructure and how small businesses contribute to the global economy today. Countries that don't have vast natural resources to export but yet need money to fund infrastructure and government decide to apply an import tax to items coming into their country from a foreign source. This is exactly what the United States did in its founding after breaking away from Great Britain. By the late 18th century, the U.S. had 13 colonies that were trying to figure out how to work together and become a nation after the destruction of the Revolutionary War. On the agenda for the first Congress was how to build a country and establish a funding system to support its growth. In July 1789, the Fifth Act of the First Congress established the U.S. Customs Service. This new agency's primary role was to raise revenue for the fledgling country through the levying of import duties. For the next 100 years or so, customs collection of import duties was the major source of funding for the federal government. So important was customs to the country's revenue-generating machine that the most opulent government buildings were the custom houses located near the ports. Historic landmarks such as a custom house in Charleston, South Carolina remain as a testament to that era. Fast forward to 2003, and the Customs Service became part of the new Department of Homeland Security created in response to the events of 9/11. The agency changed its name to Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and its main mission became keeping terrorists and their weapons out of the U.S. while facilitating lawful international travel and trade. Enforcing international trade regulations from Customs and other federal agencies became secondary. Today, CBP collects upwards of $30 billion in import duties annually. Each month, the U.S. Commerce Department publishes economic statistics with one of the most watched metrics being the balance of trade, or the difference between total exports and total imports. Since 1976, the U.S. has consistently operated a trade deficit, meaning that the amount of imports exceeds the amount of exports. This difference between exports and imports, sometimes referred to as the trade gap, goes up and down depending on exchange rates between the U.S. dollar and other currencies, the price of oil, and other factors. Countries around the world, including the U.S., watch these trade numbers because they measure roughly how much a company exports or makes and how much it imports or consumes. With a trade deficit measuring over $500 billion, the U.S. is firmly in the consumer camp. But let's look at some other statistics to fill out the story. While it's true that the U.S. is a net importing country and is in fact the top importing country in the world to the tune of $2.8 trillion in the latest figures, the United States is also a major exporter. With $2.3 trillion in exports, it falls in second place behind China, with Germany, Japan, and South Korea as the top 5 exporting nations. So what companies are responsible for making the U.S. the second largest exporting nation in the world? Well, in terms of the number of exporting companies, it's small businesses. The Commerce Department estimates that there are approximately 300,000 companies that sell goods and services to foreign countries. Of those 300,000 companies, small and medium enterprises, usually defined as companies with 500 employees or less, represent 98% of the exporters and a third of the export volume. You may be wondering what these companies sell and whom they sell to. The data shows that U.S. companies are selling transportation and computer equipment, chemicals, machinery, and agricultural products. Companies are also selling intellectual property, travel and financial services, among a host of other items. The goods and services are going to Canada, China, Mexico, Japan, and throughout the world. Why is any of this important? Well, the fact is trade is political and affects whether the U.S. opens its doors to free trade agreements and other trade promotion policies, and whether it closes its doors to certain countries and individuals with sanctions, embargoes, or higher import duties. All of these actions will impact you directly as a company doing business internationally. We have to recognize that international trade is a controversial subject, not only in the United States, but also around the world. With trade, jobs are created and jobs are lost. Limited natural resources move from the developing countries to the developed nations. There is innovation and degradation. But despite what politicians stand on these issues today, international trade has been part of the defining moments in this country's history. From the Boston Tea Party that saw colonists throw tea imported from British-controlled India into the Boston Harbor in protest, to the transatlantic slave trade that brought millions from the shores of Africa to grow crops that were traded with Europe, to the latest debates on immigration and the free trade agreement that the U.S. president signs. International trade continues to be an integral part of the political, economic, and social fabric of the United States. Trade is a two-way street, with an exporter on one end and an importer on the other. In this course, we'll look at trade from both perspectives, beginning with the view of a U.S. exporter. In the next module, we'll start a discussion with the key players involved in an export transaction.
Any questions? Don't forget, if you're interested in these modules, because there's a whole set on export, a whole set on import, and I think, for those of us sometimes, that kind of gets a brief lesson of what's happening right now on our news when we listen. And back to what I was saying, maybe some of the goodies that we get are going to be more expensive. It has to do with what's happening in the political realm of things. I thank you all for your time. I want to give you some time to do the survey. Does anybody need the phone number that you text?